My name is Jacob Sherman with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Today is April 8th, 2010, and I'm at the home of Dr. Ben Jackson in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. We are conducting an interview with Dr. Jackson about his experience with the OSU's Ethiopia project. Dr. Jackson, I thank you for inviting us in to your home and allowing us to interview you today.
You're welcome.
So first off, can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and where you were born and when you were born and your family background?
I grew up in southwestern Oklahoma. Born in the little town of Tipton, and I attended school in the rural school in southwest Oklahoma for the first several years of my schooling. And my father was a farmer, and so we naturally leaned toward agriculture. And we stayed there until about when I was in the 8th grade. We moved to Carnegie, Oklahoma, where my father began. He purchased some land and was able to begin his own farming career.
What kind of farming did your father participate in?
Primarily in cotton and wheat.
So you grew up in cotton country?
Cotton and wheat, depend on both of them.
Okay. Do you, how many acres did you guys have?
Oh, perhaps. It varied from year to year, but we leased some of the land, but around 160 acres.
So a section of land?
Pardon?
A section of land?
No, not a section. That'd be a quarter of a section.
Okay.
160 acres would be a quarter.
Okay. Did you guys raise any animals besides?
Oh, we raised, the usual things. My father liked cows, and so we milked some cows, and always a few pigs and chickens and etc. around the house.
Holstein?
No, Jersey primarily.
Jersey?
He was a Jersey man.
Really? Why was that?
I don't know if it was because of his upbringing or what it was, but he preferred Jersey. He would tell me that the Jerseys produced more cream than the Holsteins and some of the others.
That's usually it's just Holsteins. Okay.
Yeah, more volume.
Well, and Jersey. Me personally, I think Jersey's it's a prettier cow.
They are beautiful animals.
That's right. Now, did you? What were some of your chores growing up?
I had the multitude of chores from as I was able to grow a little bit older. I was able to. My father put me on the tractor, and I did a lot of plowing and cultivation and all of that. We did, when we first started farming, we did have 4 or 5 horses, and I drove a team for a little while, but I was still pretty young for that.
Quarter horses, or
no? They were just regular work horses.
What was your first tractor that you drove?
It was an International.
International. What year?
I believe it was I don't know what year it was. It's so old. It seemed like it. I can tell you it was an International F12.
Okay.
Is what the first tractor. Then we graduated a little higher up to an International H, Model H. And then we finally got to the bigger one, which is an M. That's the largest of the regular farm tractors.
Did you participate in 4-H at all?
Yeah, I had participated in FFA.
FFA?
Especially during the high school years.
Did you show at any of the local fairs, or?
No, it was primarily just to have some animals there that was working with was required. I think each FFA student had to have some sort of an animal or a project, but he was not required to show it. And ours were not that refined.
Okay. You grew up during the Depression era.
That's correct.
Can you share with us a little bit about your experiences during that time period?
Well, I can only say that it was a very depressing time, a very difficult time. We were living on the farm, and as a result, we sometimes didn't really have very much to eat. But we never did go hungry, but we sure didn't have much. I can remember a few incidents at first of, for example, going out into the cotton field and collecting old cotton stalks. So we would have some fuel to try to warm the house. Unfortunately, those cotton stalks burn almost like paper. So it kept me busy just carrying in some old cotton stalks there. But most of the time we used coal. We'd somehow manage to get some coal to burn to try to keep warm. And some kerosene, I think, for the heating, for the cooking stove.
Do you remember any of the dust storms?
I remember them very distinctly.
Can you share with us of what they were like?
Well, they were, I can recall my mother having to put a wet cloth around her face so she could breathe through the dust in the house. And of course, the houses were not tight, and the dust would settle pass through the window, well, underneath the window panes and in the cracks, and it'd just be every morning there would be a thick layer of dust, of sand in that. And so it was, and of course it was a drought associated in addition to the other problems, heat and everything else. So it was extremely difficult time.
Did Black Sunday, do you remember anything about Black Sunday?
Not particularly that Sunday, because there were many days that it was black, and the cloud, it would just be a dust cloud up there.
Did you ever get stuck in one of the dust storms?
Oh, you mean stuck? You mean with a vehicle or
A vehicle or out and about? And
most of the time, I can recall a few times when the dirt, the sand would pile up. And this was an area in southwest Oklahoma that was sandy, and the sand would blow and fill in the road. And sometimes just driving down the road in a Model A, the sand would grab the front wheels and you'd end up in the ditch. But we've never been isolated. I never got into a situation where we had to walk for miles to get away from a stalled car.
And you went to Carnegie High School?
And for the final years of my education.
What was your high school's mascot?
It seems to me I can't recall the name. It was a lion or something like that.
And how many were in your graduating class?
I think there were about 30.
30? Was Carnegie the county seat or no?
No, it was not the county seat. Anadarko was Hobart. Well, we were in between Anadarko and Hobart, and but the county seat was so we're near the line. I can't remember whether it was Hobart. I know we went to Hobart some, and then we'd go to Anadarko. I think we were more to Hobart.
Okay. What would you do for entertainment during that time period?
The most entertainment would be to find a worn out car tire and pretend it was an automobile and roll that tire around the farmyard. And I had about 2 or 3 worn out tires.
Okay, so you graduated in 1942.
That's correct.
Do you remember the Pearl Harbor Day and how you found out?
Oh, I definitely remember. It's always impressed in my mind. I believe it was on a Sunday, and my father and my uncle and myself were in a car driving along, and they had the radio on, and the announcement came about Pearl Harbor, and I remember my father and uncle discussing and saying, well, things are going to be a lot different. This is just the beginning of a big change in our lives.
Were you aware of the events leading up to it?
Not so much. I didn't really follow at that time, but I knew that it was significant.
In high school, you were involved with FFA. Were you involved with any other activities?
Not much. No, my activities were
The farm.
go back to the farm, milk cows, feed chickens. I wanted to play football, but that meant after school hours, and you needed some way to get home after the football practice, and we had no car to take me home. The school bus had already gone by, so I just had to forgo the football side.
Mm-hmm. How many did you milk the cows? 3 times a day?
Twice a day.
Twice a day? Before you went to school and after you went to school?
And in the evening, yes.
Did you... So you went from milking straight to school?
Almost, yes. We would eat breakfast. My mother would have something there for us to eat, and we would milk those cows and then grab, sometimes we'd take a sandwich with us if we had a sandwich, and run to the school bus.
You didn't mind smelling, quote unquote, like the farm going to school?
What's that again?
You didn't mind smelling like the farm?
Smelling.
Yeah, like smelling like animals and whatnot.
Oh, I see what you mean. No, I don't know. Maybe we did smell, but we were so accustomed to it.
Well, the reason why I ask is like it was one of my parents are my father grew up on a farm, and his he always remembers he felt almost bad about going to school smelling
like a farmer.
Yeah.
No, I never did encounter that. We didn't have inside plumbing or anything, but I don't know. We managed somehow to.
That's right.
Keep clean enough to go to school.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys own a radio, or was?
Not in about 1936 or 7. We got the first battery powered radio.
Did the farm have electricity, or when did that come along?
Oh, it did not come along until after I had already graduated from high school and had about the time I was going to the Army.
Okay. I was just curious. I was just wondering if the rural electrification.
No, it had not reached that point yet when we were there, when I was on the farm.
Okay. Do you want to discuss your Army experiences at all?
It's up to you. Yeah, I can be glad to mention it.
Because I noticed that you earned a Bronze Star.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that.
No, yeah, I have no problem with
Okay.
that. That's the good part. I guess some people wear a scar still from some of their experiences.
That's what I was trying to avoid. So.
I have had no real problem. I had some nightmares when I first got back. I was still thinking we were still over there fighting.
All right, let's get into that then. Did you volunteer or were you drafted?
I volunteered. I was actually deferred for farming, and I just didn't feel right with all of my friends going to the service. So I just finally I could have stayed on the farm and continued in a safe place, but I said no, I need to go. So I volunteered, and they put me in the infantry.
So, did you train at Benning?
No, I trained first at at Little Rock, Arkansas, which is Camp Robinson. And then after about 18 weeks there, they sent us up east, northeast to New Jersey, I believe it was. And they were looking for bodies to fill in because they had so many casualties over there in Europe. So it wasn't long after that we were on a troop convoy going to cross. We went to England first and then across to Europe, to France.
What did your parents think of your decision to volunteer?
That worried them. They knew more of the gravity of the situation than a young 18-year-old did. And it was stressful for them, I know, very stressful. And one of the few times I'd seen my father cry was when I had come home from basic training, and I was leaving, and he knew that I was probably going to be going. And so as he took me to the bus, to catch the bus to go back, he was crying.
Were you an only child, or how was the deferment set up, or why could have you received deferment?
Well, the reason I could have stayed on because they needed people to produce food. And since I was a farm boy, they said, well, you're more important on the farm. But I chose to ask to be put in the 1A classification, which is means that you're ready to go.
Yeah.
So, but it was primarily because I didn't feel comfortable staying there when the other my classmates and others were already in the service.
How many people did you know enter the service?
How many of my classmates?
Yes.
Almost all of
really?
the graduating class that I was in. All the men, the males.
Wow. So you went to England, then what years, you were in England, 43, 44?
44, I think, is when I arrived in England. I didn't go immediately after high school. I didn't volunteer immediately. I went to Oklahoma City and worked in a parking lot and attended Drawn Business College for a while, but I didn't like it. And so I wasn't very satisfied. I didn't care for typing and shorthand and these types of things.
And so what was it like for a farm boy to travel overseas and experience that? How did you feel?
Well, there were a lot of other boys, young men in my age, and who had never been much outside of home too. So we were all, not everyone, but many of us were farm boys. But there were some city boys in the group too, from New York and other parts of the Northeast. But we just took it as a part of life and tried to make something out of every day that we had, whatever it was going to be.
When did you cross over into France?
In 40, I think it was in early 45, just before D-Day.
Just before D-Day?
Yes.
Wait a minute. D-Day was June 6, 44.
I mean, well, let's see. Wait a minute. Yes, it's right. It was after D-Day. I'm sorry. I stand corrected, because when we came across from England and went to the port of Le Havre, it was torn apart, and we had difficulty finding a place to dock the ship. That's right. It's after D-Day, not before D-Day. And the U.S. forces were by that time up near the German border.
Close to the Rhine?
Close to the Siegfried Line, which is that dragon's tooth
Yes.
thing that moves through there. And that's where I got into my action.
Was this before or after the bulge?
This was, we went in just before the bulge. There was snow on the ground and it was cold, and we had to live in foxholes and eat K rations. And a few days later, the Germans made that counterattack, and we were fortunate in not being the main thrust. We were on the flank. Now, part of my division, which I was in the 78th Infantry Division, part of my 78th Infantry Division got hit very hard. But my particular battalion and regiment were just on the flank. Now, that does not mean that there wasn't action, but it wasn't quite as severe as, we didn't see those tanks coming charging at us, but it was fog and snow and all of the miserable things that you have to put up with.
So you saw action there. Did you take me through that battle?
Well, I went through 3 major battles.
Okay.
The first one was there at along the border with Germany, right there on the border. And the first day we went into action, there was, I don't know, about 6 inches of snow, or maybe a little more on the ground, and it was in some mountainous area there, right there near the Siegfried line. Lots of pine trees, tall pines. And the first day they sent me up there with another man, and I don't remember why I was told to go up there toward the front lines, but the Germans spotted us. And they began to lob artillery shells on us. And the shells would come in and explode and blow dirt and snow all over us as we lay there on the ground. But that was the first, is what I call the first, sometimes they refer to it as the baptismal fire. So it's the first time you're really into some action. And then from there we moved me up to, we'd lost a lot of men, and so they put me up there on a machine gun, heavy machine gun position out there on the front line after 3 or 4 days. And that's there during the Battle of the Bulge went on, as it raged just away from us, just a short distance there. But it was snow and foggy, and we would hear these planes coming in, and the sound of the engine, you knew they were German planes. They were much a louder sound than the American planes.
Luftwaffe.
Yeah, and so they would fly over at night right over there, and they would send runners up to where we were on the front lines and saying, they're dropping paratroops behind us, be ready. And here it was so foggy you could hardly see 10 feet away from you. And you look back and you couldn't see anything. And then you'd look up at the front and see if there were any troops, German troops there. As a matter of fact, there were hedgerows. And sometimes there'd be a little gap in the hedgerow. And one night I was there on guard, and I noticed these white figures. It looked like they had sheets on, and they were running across that gap. And we started shooting at them. I think I was the first one to make a fire shot. Unfortunately, I had a tracer round in my rifle, and so it gave our position away. And so they immediately fired back with some kind of automatic weapons. But that was a very difficult time, to not knowing, especially the unknown on all of these things. But that went on for several weeks. And some of our men were being lost due to the trench foot. They couldn't keep their feet from freezing.
Foot rot.
Foot rot. And they had to have them amputated. And they would bring up dry socks from the kitchen every day. We'd have to take our socks off, wet socks, send them back, then they'd put them in the dryer. Of course, we never got the same socks back. But we need to get a pair of dry socks every day.
Mm.
And so I never got a scratch. I never got trench foot. I never did any of that.
You were lucky.
Very fortunate.
Very.
Yes, right. So anyway, once that finally the bulge was contained, and it was a beautiful sight that morning that the fog lifted, the skies cleared, and here came our planes in there attacking those German tanks. And I said, boy, now things are looking better. And it was just after Christmas. I thought, well, that's a wonderful Christmas.
That's right.
And sit there in that foxhole, and I'd think, you guys up there in that sky may not get home, but if you do, you'll have a place to sleep and some hot food and bed. And I'll be sitting down here. And I don't know what I'll be doing. Mm. So I vowed then, I said, if I ever have to go back into the service, I'm going to go into the Air Force, not the infantry. But they at that time, I had no choice. They were washing people out of the Air Force and sending them to my unit right and left. And they were angry at the fact that they had been washed out, but they needed them over there as infantrymen. We had some of those Air Force former cadets. They would go around singing that Air Force song before we actually got overseas. And some of the infantry officers didn't like it, but they couldn't stop you from singing.
Who is your general? Was it? You weren't in Patton's army.
No, I was not in Patton's. I was either in Montgomery. And I believe Montgomery was a British general. And then they'd switch us back and forth between him and Hodges, I believe it was.
That was okay. And after the bulge was closed, did you advance into Germany then?
That's right. We began to immediately head into Germany toward the big city of Cologne, there on the Rhine River. Mm-hmm. And most of the time we moved fairly fast. The Germans were collapsing some as we came along, so there wasn't near the serious fighting that we had there. And then once we got to Cologne, I don't remember going across the Rhine there, but we did somewhere there.
Did you see was Cologne bombed out?
Yes, quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
But the cathedral, at least, one of the landmarks of Cologne is that Cologne cathedral. Mm-hmm. And it appeared to be fairly intact. The spires were still up there and all of that. But we didn't stay in Cologne. We just kept moving. But the thing I know how I got across the Rhine now. Of course. I was with the group that captured that bridge over the Remagen Bridge over the Rhine River. Mm. We were just moving along down there fairly fast, and we got ordered something. Get in the jeeps and the trucks, and we're going. We found we got a bridge, and so we went across that bridge after dark, sometime, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night, and established us a place over there on the across the Rhine. And then the next morning, boy, the Germans were coming in there with these bombers trying to knock that bridge out.
You had the bridgehead.
We had the bridgehead, that was it. It was just a big cliff there from where we were, but at least we stuck there with it. And they dropped in some paratroops trying to push us back. And our men were so exhausted from traveling and fighting that they couldn't hardly react when they saw a German. And I said, boy, these are terrible looking American troops. They're dirty, disheveled, hungry, limping. And they kept saying, keep going. Mm-hmm. We've got to go. We've got to do this.
Well, at that point, you knew the war was winding down.
we knew that it was not the same type of war as it had been, but we didn't know how fast that was going to wind down. We still had some fighting to do after that.
Yeah.
We went into the large steel manufacturing city of Wuppertal. That seemed to be one of our last big engagements.
Was that part of the Battle of the Ruhr?
Part of the Ruhr pocket or whatever they call it there.
The last basic defense on the Western Theater.
Yeah.
Then how far did you push? How far did you get on to? Where were you on VE Day, like geographically?
I was in Berlin.
You were in Berlin?
Yes.
How did you manage to be in Berlin?
Well, the Germans said...
Because the Soviets took Berlin.
That's right. But we always had... The whole idea was that the different Allied forces were going to share Berlin. There was a British sector, an American sector, a Russian sector, and a French sector. And so they assigned part of my division up there as part of the American sector.
Oh, wow. So you saw the remnants of Berlin.
I sure did.
Could you describe what you saw?
Oh, yeah. I even have pictures of it, some of it. It was just total destruction. The apartment buildings were, most of them were demolished. We did find some apartments that were not hit, and we just took over those. And I had a little apartment for my own self there. But most of the things, and of course the Germans were in terrible straits. They didn't have food. They didn't have, forget about luxuries. They would even fight for a cigarette butt that a soldier might throw on the street, and used coffee grounds that our mess kitchen would throw out. They'd fight for those things. Just didn't have them. They've been deprived so long.
Did you see any remnants of Nazis and Nazism, or?
Not much. But just before we took over, before we got into Berlin, well, we were taking these smaller towns pretty fast. The tanks would usually go in front, and then the infantry would follow right behind the tank. And then they were going so fast that the Germans didn't have a chance or didn't know where else to go, so they just had to stay. At first, the Germans had been told the Americans were going to kill you all and rape the women and all of this, and so they moved them out. But as time passed, and we were able to go through there so fast they couldn't leave. And so one of the things that I noticed in this Nazism, you ask, was that some of the men in my company were Jewish. And Jewish and the Yiddish are similar. And so they could communicate in German with these German civilians who were left behind. They're so-called civilians, most of them were. And just for fun, they would start talking to those kids, and then they would say to them, or ask them, "Are you a Nazi?" And of course they would say, "Nix Nazi, nix Nazi." And then this Jewish guy would throw his hand up in the air and say, "Heil Hitler." And those kids, because they had this ingrained in them, they'd go, "Heil Hitler." Say, "Yeah, you're a Nazi." It was a good pastime too. But they had been ingrained for so long. They just couldn't, they just reacted to it. That's the main thing I noticed. And of course, at first, there was no fraternization of men with German women, our soldiers with German women. But that was hard to keep. Boy, these guys were out. sneaking out of the campus company headquarters looking for a beautiful German girl.
Well, German women actually, they were without men for so long.
That's right. They had hardly been around men, and the Americans treated them very nicely, and the Americans had some cigarettes and some chocolate and things that they just loved to have. So they wanted to be friends with them.
Did you interact with any Russian soldiers when you were in Berlin, or did you
Very
have contact?
few. We saw them there. We heard stories about the Russians and how ruthless they were. And the Germans would tell us some of the stories, and then some of the Americans who had contact with. No, the Russians stayed in their sector for the most part. And so they didn't, excuse me, we didn't have much direct contact with them. But we know that many of them were uneducated soldiers. They just brought up there as kind of like cannon fodder, and so they didn't know much. For example, a little Mickey Mouse wristwatch, which was popular, would sell for $100 to $150 in this invasion money, and I think every Russian company had a printing press, and they printed. Now, some of those Russian soldiers hadn't been paid in months and months. And so they gave them this money, this invasion money, and so they wanted something. And boy, you got a Mickey Mouse watch. They'll pay you good money for that.
If I may ask, how did you receive the Bronze Star?
It was part of that campaign that around the Siegfried line that we were in there. It was what they call meritorious service. I think that was primarily there in that particular campaign. That was my first battle star, and it was some very, very difficult fighting at that time.
Did you receive any other merits?
I received nothing like a Bronze Star. I never received a Purple Heart because I never did get hit.
Yeah.
Wonderful. No, I was receiving good contact ribbon, and I'm putting that all together now in that thing you saw there. Presidential unit citation, the unit itself, what they had accomplished.
Was there any chance that you would have served in the Japanese invasion?
At that time, we thought that when the Germans finally collapsed and surrendered, that we'll probably be sent over there to the South Pacific. Fortunately, the Japanese suddenly surrendered also, and so we hadn't even made much preparation yet. And of course, we were part of the Army of Occupation there in Berlin. But we did hear of some of the people being sent back, and especially those that had not had much combat.
Yes. How did you hear about the news of the Japanese surrender?
I guess it must have been there in the camp or in where we were, in probably somewhere there in Germany.
Was there celebration? Was there celebration because of that event?
Not big celebration. No, everybody was happy, of course, but no, there was no going around firing off rifles and things like that I know of.
Okay. And then you were discharged?
After the Army of Occupation. And they even sent me back to England for a little schooling back there on dairy, dairy plant management. Well, it'd be good to get away. But anyway, no, after the Berlin assignment, and we were being discharged. Nobody objected to that.
Mm-hmm. And you, after you were discharged, you came back to Oklahoma?
Yes.
And what made you decide to enroll at Oklahoma A&M?
Well, I first enrolled at Cameron
Okay.
in Lawton. And that was because, first, Cameron at that time was a 2-year college.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, it was closer to my home down there in southwest Oklahoma. Yes. And I was able to, I excelled there at Cameron, making practically all A's. Mm. And so I had no real, I worked hard, but then after 2 years, well, it was time to do something. And I said, well, I think I better go on to Stillwater. That's where most of my friends were going.
What did you, can you share with us your time up in Stillwater as a student? What stands out?
Well, first, one of the things that stands out as a student there is that we were able to rent from the university these little 16 by 16 foot houses, Army prefab houses that made of plywood. And my wife and I had married while we were both in Cameron.
Okay.
When we married. And so we needed a place to live up there, and that seemed to be the most economical. Mm-hmm. And they weren't much to look at or live in, but we got along. When you're young, you do things that you don't think about later on. I can remember even those little prefab houses, though, in the winter, the ice would form on the inside of the walls because it was just a plywood wall. Big chunks of ice would be there, and the cockroaches, we'd fight the cockroaches every night. But it was, I was a little bit intimidated when I first went up there because people said, well, you've done very well at Cameron, but you can't make those kind of grades up here. Mm. Well, I did.
And good for you, right?
Next thing I know is I took 18 to 20 hours a semester and graduated up there in about, instead of 2 years, about a year and a half. Went to August Intercession. I went to summer school and all that, and had a job as a janitor there at OSU in the home economics building. But shortly as I was just about to graduate, I was called in by one of my genetics professor.
Who was that?
Melvin Jones. He said, Ben, they're looking for someone to work in the wheat and oat and barley research here in the agronomy farm, in the agronomy department. Full time, and they will also give this person, opportunity to study for his time off to study for his master's degree at the same time. And the pay was about what it would have been if I'd gone outside. So I went in and talked to the man who was in charge, and he hired me. So I started working immediately as I finished my BS degree. I started working there with agronomy and in the agronomy farm on research on wheat, oat, and barley. And did that in about two and a half years. Did a master's degree, and then, as I told you, Bill Abbott called me and wanted to know if I'd go to Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to that. We're approaching the end of this first hour. We got like 15 minutes left, but I'm gonna still continue with the background for the last 15 minutes because at this time OSU was undergoing a great transition with veterans returning and going to school there, and you lived in veterans housing, and what else stands out from that time period?
Not much, except that we were so busy. When you're taking 18 hours, you don't have much time to.
Mm-hmm.
It all runs together, and you're trying to make good grades and get through there. I can't. I can remember those houses that stood out to me. That the ice freezing on the inside of the walls, and
Did you live there all for the whole time?
All the time we were.
Wow.
At the Stillwater.
Did you have children at that time?
No.
No?
No children.
Okay, let's back this up. How did you meet your wife?
She was from the adjoining town there in southwest Oklahoma, a little place called Mountain View, which is just next to Carnegie.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew her cousin. Even though he was a Mountain View boy and I was a Carnegie boy, we get together once in a while. And he introduced me to her, and she had come back from California and been in college out there.
She older?
Anyway, pardon?
Was she older? Was she older than you?
No, a little bit younger.
Okay. Sorry, what were you saying?
And so anyway, he introduced us, and then during the war, he introduced us before I went to the service. And so during the war, occasionally I'd write to her, and she'd respond with a letter. So when I got back home and discharged, then we started dating some. And then the second year, I think, that we were at Cameron, we decided to get married. Lived in the dormitory. They had a dormitory for married couples down there at Cameron. So we lived in a dormitory room, ate at the cafeteria. And she was trying to major in home economics. But you had a lot of these basic courses to, like chemistry and math, etc., get through. So we both went to school together there.
And let's see here. Sorry. Who are some of the professors that you can recall at OSU that stand out? Well,
the man that I told you that recommended me for joining the staff of OSU, his name was Melvin Jones. He was a geneticist and taught the genetics course there. And of course, Dr. Schleichhuber, the man that I actually worked under, he taught one course. It's cereals course. But he was a good inspiration for me. And he's also my boss when I went to work out there. The people that really made an impression on me at OSU, I'm trying to think of the names and some of the people. Several of them were outstanding lecturers. There was a fellow by the name of Harnden, Harnden, he was a bacteriologist. And I took his August intercession course every day, twice a day. But I learned a lot about bacteria that I knew nothing about before. And he wasn't one of these. When I thanked him told him I had enjoyed his course, he said, "Well, let's see what you do with it now." He didn't say, "Oh, thank you," for all the niceties. But I respected the man. He knew what he was talking about, I think. Well, there were a number of, I thought, good professors there that I had met and took courses under. A fellow in entomology named F.A. Fenton. He taught the entomology and also headed the entomology department. H.I. Featherly, a man in botany whom I had a lot of respect and knew him. And of course, High Staten, he's the one that recommended me to go to Ethiopia. And he taught a course in agrostology, not in agrostology, it was anyways in soil conservation, I think it was called. I was fortunate to have some good teachers.
That's good.
Oh yeah, I think they helped inspire me to do something.
Did they help inspire you to eventually teach?
Possibly, but I had more research, strictly research ingrained in me because I'd worked for my master's out there and in research strictly.
What did you research with wheat, barley, and oats?
What kind of research was it?
Yeah, what kind of research?
It was primarily variety improvement,
Mhm.
breeding varieties for better yield, better resistance to disease and quality, things of that sort.
Did you? Where did you do your research?
There on the station,
The station?
right there at the agronomy farm.
Right on campus.
They're just it just was then just off of campus. I don't know if it's on campus now or not.
Did you ever work on the Magruder plots?
No, because that was primarily soils,
Okay.
and I was working in the genetics and breeding area. So I know where they were. I went past them many times, and I'm well aware of the talking about them. Matter of fact, it was very controversial things when they wanted to move those Magruder plots. They wanted it to be sure it would be a long-term studies, and they were worried about when they wanted to put buildings or something on there. Because those Magruder plots were first down there on the campus there near Stout Hall, as I remember.
Yes, sir. Now, did you see any construction buildings being built? Did you see the Union go up?
Oh, yes. Very much. I watched the closed Washington Street. Block off Washington. When I first got there, we drove right straight where the student union is now.
What'd you think of the Union when it was completed?
Well, at first I thought it was wonderful, except that I thought, how in the world are we going to ever pay for all that? And then the first thing I knew, they were adding on to it and improving it. And I said, well, one thing about Henry Bennett, he was a real visionary. And so Henry's the one that really got that thing going. Got some money, bond money or something to get it going. And then, of course, I watched the library building go up and tearing that other one down. And we had an old power plant there on the campus. And I watched it being demolished. I saw a lot of different buildings.
And I must say that the Union is currently going under a massive renovation. So they're adding it. They're adding it so that the north entrance is going to be more of a grand entrance style, because that's where the foot traffic goes. Because you got the classroom building right there, and the foot traffic, and coming from the library. So that's going to be another grand entrance. So
I see.
So just an update for you if you go up there.
Yeah, well, someday I hope to get back up there and see some of those things.
Was Dr. Bennett, was he president at your time, or was it Dr. Bennett?
Yes, when we first went there, he was president.
Did you ever interact with him?
No, he was so. He was in political circles as well as the other things, but I remember distinctly when the O'Colly came out one day and said that Bennett had been appointed administrator for the .4 program. And that meant that he was stepping down, at least temporarily, from his presidential duties. And now the president that I got to know the best was Wilhelm.
Okay, we'll get into that because we'll get into that the next hour. But
all right.
Do you recall being on campus when news of Dr. Bennett's death?
Oh yes. We knew it. It was a very sobering moment for us all. We knew that that the university and the country had lost a very valuable man. And of course, Bennett's the one that set up that Ethiopian program for OSU to go to. He thought that'd be the best place. I think he had a choice of several.
Yeah, I
games.
was gonna ask, did he have a choice of like locations?
Right, I think so.
Did you attend any of the services that were for him? Or?
No, okay. I didn't get to this. I think probably the pressure of my work. They didn't turn. As I remember, they did not close the school down or anything like that. And so we just continued to work.
What about, did you attend any sporting events?
I attended the, football and basketball and some wrestling.
Some wrestling? What was your favorite sport?
Oh, I think that probably it was basketball because I was there. When I was there, Henry Ida was the king of basketball.
You were there when the OSU won the titles, right?
And of course, to me, it was entertaining just to watch Iba and his contortions when somebody would make a boo-boo. He would be right out there on top of them.
What was it like to watch a game in Iba Hall?
Well, it was wonderful.
Or Gallagher. It was called Gallagher.
Yeah, it was called Gallagher back then. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed some of the football games. And I did enjoy some of the wrestling. Mm-hmm. We had some good wrestlers, and I'd go to some of those meets. There was a pretty woman who worked for the cotton man in the agronomy department. It's a secretary. Mm-hmm. And I'd see this big guy drive up in the afternoon, and she'd get in the car with him and drive off. And I made a comment. I said, "What in the world is that she seeing that big fat slob?" I said, "Oh, don't you know who that is? That's Dick Hutton. He is the heavyweight wrestling man here." I said, "Well, then I don't want to call him a slob." But so I went back. One time I said, "I've just got to see him wrestle." Oh, he threw that big guy down and nothing, flat pinned him, and it was over.
Now, do you consider yourself an Aggie or a cowboy?
I'm mostly an Aggie.
Okay. Have to ask.
Yeah.
Because that was before the name change, so.
Yeah.
Can you state how you were initially approached and how did that come about?
I was just completed my master's degree and was a staff member of OSU when I was first contacted by the OSU representative for Ethiopia, whose name was Bill Abbott. And I approached it first with quite a bit of negativity, thinking that my wife would not be interested in going to Africa and possibly deprivations over there. But anyway, I told Bill that I would consider it. Matter of fact, I was thinking about going on up to Minnesota and starting my PhD, trying to find a scholarship or something to go up there. And I said, well, I don't know if I have enough funds to do that or not. And so when this proposition to go over to Ethiopia and work for OSU came on, well, I approached my wife on it, told her what had happened, that Bill had called me and asked if I would consider it. High Staten, who I had a lot of respect for, had recommended me. And she seemed to be extremely willing and happy to do that. She said it would be wonderful. Of course, there was another reason. She had a cousin over there. And the cousin they had been almost like sisters when they were younger. And so she knew someone over there that she could visit with and have some interplay. This cousin was a staff member had married a staff member of the OSU veterinary faculty. And so he was over there, and she joined her husband over there. So anyway, that helped to seal the thing. And so we just, after a short time, they tried to talk me into, some people tried to talk me in not going. Said, oh, Ben, you need to go ahead and get that PhD out of the way and all of this. And I thought, well, she is that interested in going, and I can almost put up with anything. If I don't want to come home to a wife that's complaining.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the main reason that we decided to go. And then I approached my mother and her mother. We just had a child, and her mother was a widow, and it was very difficult for a grandparent to see their only child and their grandchild leaving for Africa, and it was on a 2-year assignment. It wasn't a short trip. But anyway, everybody was gracious and said yes, that it's all right, it's what you want to do.
Was there an orientation process that you had to go through?
Not much.
So you were basically thrown into the fire?
That's right. Of course, I conferred with people like High Staten about what was going on over there and what might be expected. High had set up the program or tried to get it started.
What year were you asked to go over?
Let's see if I can see my check off when I was. It was in 54 that we went over there, 1954, and it was probably, it wasn't more than 6 months earlier that I'd been approached on it, maybe less than that. And we had just bought a house in Stillwater and had to try to think about getting rid of it. So it was big decisions to make.
Who arranged for you to go over there, and what was that process like?
Bill Abbott was the one who represented the OSU on there, and all questions and all problems seemed to end up in his office. But he was very, very helpful and very supportive. And so it was a pretty smooth transition. He had some good secretaries and other people there to smooth out. So I considered Bill to be a very efficient and effective administrator for that program.
Describe for me the actual physical trip of going over there.
We had to first find some money to buy, because we had to have some supplies. You just don't run into the store over there like you do here. And but I needed some funds. And strangely enough, the man who sold me some life insurance, his name was Claude Bradshaw, and he was there in Stillwater. And I'd known him for a while, and he'd sold me a little policy. And I told him my predicament. I said, the bank is reluctant to loan me some money, even for 6 months, without a cosigner. Well, that infuriated Claude. He said, let's go right now to the bank. And he walked in there and he tells one of the vice presidents, get the papers out, I'll sign them. They asked no more questions. And of course, I paid it back in a few months. So that part of the preparation, we had to have we had to ship our furnishings and everything. Some, I guess, went by air freight and some by sea freight. But everyone, OSU had a good supportive program in Ethiopia there with the administrative assistant. And we didn't, and then having her cousin over there, place to live and all, it was no real big, and of course being young helped
Yes. How did you get over there? Did you fly or did you travel by sea?
We flew, and at that time they were very generous. This was, of course, USAID was sponsoring and paying for this thing. But anyway, they made arrangements for us to go first class. Not only that, but they had these airplanes. What did they call those? They had three tails on the TWA, and they had you could make up beds, and they were $100 a night for each bed. And they actually bought us a ticket for the bed in that plane, so that as we were flying along, we would have a place to sleep. So we flew on that TWA. Constellation is the name of the plane I was trying to come up with. Of course, it was a propeller-driven plane at that time. And it took a long time. It didn't fly very fast.
Mm-hmm.
But we flew all the way to Cairo on it.
From New York?
From New York.
No stops in between?
Oh, yeah. There were stops
To
in
refuel.
Ireland and seemed like in Paris and in Rome. We finally got to Cairo, and that's where we got off of the TWA flight, and then we had to take Ethiopian Airlines flight on down there. But it only flew twice a week. So they had to put us up in a hotel in Cairo for a couple of days till the next flight was available. They gave us a nice hotel room. We did a little being a tourist there. Went out to the pyramids and etc.
Did you? How old was your child at that time?
How old?
Yes.
This is the one that's downstairs here now. She must have been about 4 or 5.
How did she travel?
Did very well, except that at Cairo, we had a VIP sheikh or prince Muslim prince on the flight. His name was Ali Khan. I don't know if you've ever heard that name.
Yes, sir.
But Ali Khan was on that flight. And so when we got to Cairo, it was a little bit of confusion around the plane there as they were waiting for Ali to come off and they wanted to welcome him and all this. And our daughter got away from us for a few minutes. And my wife panicked. Fortunately, somebody grabbed her by the hand or something. But she was running in outside of the plane there. Of course, we were sitting there on the ground. But that was the biggest event. And of course, they were all nervous. Nobody slept very, very soundly, even if you had a bed on the plane.
Where were you initially assigned duties?
Where or what?
Where?
Where? In Addis Ababa.
What'd you do?
I was first asked to establish the Debrazite experiment station. And the land had been given or made available to us by the emperor or whoever was responsible. But there was nothing there. Mm-hmm. I had to try to organize equipment, tractors, etc., to get out there and plow land and try to get a well so we could irrigate. And then Hugh Hedger came along a few months later, and he was a horticulturist, and he was also assigned to work with me. And then they gave each Hugh a man and me a man, that is, Ethiopian man whose students had just graduated from Purdue. And they were cream of the crop. One was named Worku Makasha, that was Hedger's man, and mine was Danyachu Yirgu. And Dan later went back to Purdue, got a doctor's degree. He was very bright person. He grew a farm boy, grew up in the farm. He and I traveled together. I could talk to him about the problems of the Ethiopian farmers and what we ought to do in research that might directly help them, not some wild basic concept out there that we might want to prove. So anyway, I had Dan and helping me there at the experiment station, this new station. We had to try to establish everything from fruit trees to crops on it.
How big was it?
Oh, it must have been at least 200 acres or more. Right there on the edge of the Debrecite. And it was really a challenge for us. And we would go down there, and Hugh Hedger and I and these two Ethiopian counterparts, and we would spend sometimes 2 or 3 days down there. They had a hotel. And it's kind of a resort area, a lake in there at Debrecite. And we'd stay in the hotel and get us so we didn't have to spend the time commuting. It was about an hour's travel, as I recall, from Addis down there.
What was the biggest challenge at the Debrecite?
The Debrecite first was to get a fence around it so that the people knew where their boundaries were and where they could come in and encroach on it or not encroach on these places. And secondly was to try to get some semblance of experimental plots set up. And the seed, we seemed like we had some seed there, and I don't know where it came from. Maybe High Staten might have brought it, or I don't know how they got there. Soybeans, wheat, things of that sort. And Hugh had to go out and try to get some fruit trees and pineapples and things. He did actually finally go to Kenya and got some things and brought them in. But this was before Bill Webb came into the picture. After Hugh and I had been moved from Addis down to Alamaya, we needed somebody up there to sort of follow up on that station. And so they brought Bill Webb in just to work on that Debrecite station and keep it going and see what's going on. But there were a lot of challenges out there at first, but we tried to drill a well. I don't know whether we finally got one drilled. The water resources people put a well rig out there to drill. We kept, because it is a volcanic origin, there were a lot of cracks in the soil, even down deep, and you'd hit the water and then you'd lose it because it'd go out in one of those cracks. But it seemed like we finally got they built a small tin shed out there for us, and we did finally get a tractor or something. But it was a very big challenge. And then the second year they moved some of the first year graduating students from Gemma up there. And so we had to also teach class at the University College in Addis Ababa.
What did you teach?
I taught genetics and field crops, as I recall, and he taught horticulture, and I don't know what else other people were teaching up there too. But these would be juniors and seniors that finished their freshman and sophomore year there at Gemma.
Were these students were they able to pick up on the information of genetics?
Yeah, but these were bright students. They had the cream of the crop up there. And they were very bright, and they understood English well, and just had a good mind. So
So you didn't use translators in your class?
No.
Now, so you lived in Addis at that time?
I lived 2 years in Addis.
And you commuted to Debrecite?
Debrecite, and then this University College, which was there in Addis, and I'd go there to teach.
What was Addis like at that time?
just a large rundown city. It was all the houses had fences or what we call compounds around them, stone walls, and there was a lot of problems with burglars. And so we had a night guard at night out there just to see that nobody carried everything away. We had a PX, so we could go down there and buy some groceries. You couldn't buy fresh vegetables, of course, but you could pick up flour and coffee and oil and things that you needed, basics. Oh, it was, but it was a challenge, but it was a good challenge in many ways.
You lived in an apartment?
House. I think most of us had houses over there.
House in Addis?
Addis and Addis.
Okay. What was that like?
Well, it was nice. Well, we had a 3-bedroom, very high ceilings, and but they had inside toilets and all, and then they usually would build sometimes a kitchen on the outside, a little shanty, or not a shanty, but a lean-to that's there nearby. And because they used a lot of charcoal to cook with, and it smoke up the house bad. And so the cook or the maid would bring the food in from outside to eat after they had it cooked. But we had running water and toilets and bathtubs, and then the compound, a big wall compound, high wall compound, and then we had a night guard to watch it.
Did you have servants?
Yes, we had 2 or 3 servants. One of the big problems is that some of the servants did not understand English, and then some of them were just basically dishonest. We had, the servants are not. You would not expect a college-educated person to be a servant. That's just the basis of it. But sometimes they would lie to you and do things, and you just have to be very, very cautious about what to do. And to see that my wife caught the maid wearing some of her underclothes.
How were the servants assigned to you?
They came along with us. Usually, most of the time, they claim they had a letter of recommendation from someone. And somebody sat around at night writing up letters for them for a fee.
Yeah.
And I remember 2 or 3 amusing examples. One was this letter, apparently from some Britisher, and he said, "Now, this man has worked for me for so long, and if you can provide a berth for him, I suggest it be a wide one." And he thought that was a wonderful letter because he didn't understand English slang.
That's right.
And one came and said, "He's been a good man, he's a good servant, but he's got leprosy."
That's funny. You were in Addis 2 years.
Yes.
Half split time, would you call it, between Deverzite and teaching at the university?
Yeah, maybe. I was only teaching 1 or 2 courses at the university, and I don't remember how I handled it now, but...
Was that the main university at the time?
That's right.
That's right. How many students were at that university? How big was it?
No, it was not just for agriculture, but for everyone. I don't know how many students were there. I never did really get involved in close contact with the university. I just go to the classroom and teach.
How did you come about ending up at Alabama?
The college had already started the construction on the college when I got there. And it was a kind of a slow at times, and the contractor was not always putting in the time, or he couldn't get some materials or something, and so it stretched out for quite a while. And finally, they decided it was time that we had to they had to do something with those students. They'd come from Gemma, and they'd come up there, and they'd spend a year at Addis, and they needed to be out there at the college so they could get some experience and feel for what the whole program was like. So they just told us that we've got to move down there.
Was this, were you asked at the time of your leave to go up there?
You mean when I first started, when I was asked to go over there?
No. Did you, were you required to come back to the States after 2 years at that time?
I think if I don't know if it was a requirement, but everybody was ready to come back and renew some contacts back here.
So I was wondering if you made the decision to go up to Alamaya before or after you.
Well, that was the whole idea, was that I would go to Alamaya.
Oh,
but
initially?
when I got there,
Nothing was
ready.
built. Okay.
I had to wait. And so in the meantime, they said, we want you to try to establish this experiment station. And then I think after a semester, they said, well, we got to move some of these students from Gemma up here. We need you to teach also.
Mm-hmm. So when you went, so 56, you were up in Alamaya then?
56. Must have been in 56. I was there. Yeah, I was probably in Alamaya at that time.
What was that campus like at that time?
It wasn't complete. We had no water, no running water in the houses. We finally put some barrels up above on the stand up there at the side of the house. The roads had not been paved or anything, so when it was raining, it was so muddy you could hardly get a car in and out. It was just a miserable, and they bought an electric temporary generator and set it out there in the middle of the staff compound. And at night, so we would have lights. I know they did it at night, but maybe they started in the early morning. I guess they did. Anyway, we had some electricity that way. They hooked that generator up to the houses somehow. And then at night, we would go into rotation of which staff members this week had to go turn off the generator. They would blink the lights 3 times as a warning that it's going off. And the problem was that some people like to stay up late and read and do things. Others said, no, I'm going to go to bed. And so those that wanted to stay up, this guy happened to going to turn them off. He turned them off early. They didn't like that. There were we had, I think, around 8 or 9 staff members that had moved out there at that time. But the roads were muddy. The construction was still ongoing. He got signed, as I was telling you earlier, I got assigned to be the dean, acting dean of that place out there under those conditions.
How did that come about?
The Dr. Anger, he wasn't a doctor, but C.L. Anger was the first president. Well, Luther Brennan, I guess, was president. And then Luther went home, and then Anger took over. And then Anger, time for him to leave. And Loris Parcher had gone there as an economist, ag economist. And they made him acting president. But then we had to move those students and get that Alamaya underway.
Yes.
So Parcher turns to me. And he said, Ben, I want you to be the one to go out there and get this college going. I said, I have to stay here in Addis. And I said, well, there's some other people I think that you probably should choose better than me. No, I want you. Well, anyway, I went out there and we moved those students. And first, they didn't even have a dormitory to stay in. We had what they called the American Building. It's just a big Quonset that they had used in the International Exposition at Addis. They gave us that, and we erected it out there. And they had a place for a garage to work on cars on one end, and they just put some bunk beds back there for these. But there were only 10 or 15 of the senior students at that time.
There's only, I was going to ask how many students were at that time?
Not many.
10, 15?
Yeah, the maximum. But
How many courses would they take?
Well, they about the same as they did here at OSU if you were here in school. Most of them, 4 or 5 courses a semester.
What type of degree would they get?
BS degree in agriculture.
BS, and it was just called agriculture?
I think so.
No special.
No specialization at that time. You weren't going into ag chemistry or
dairy science.
No.
Okay. Do you know the backstory of how LMI was chosen as the location?
I know the story I was told by some of the people I thought was pretty well known. You were knowledgeable about it. That, and then this included High State, was one of them that told me about it. That was the hometown that the emperor was born in, out there in that area. Harar, I believe, was the hometown of the emperor. And he wanted this agricultural school to be located in Harar province. And he gave them some leeway about where in Harar that they could go, but it was a pretty good leeway so that they weren't limited to one particular spot. Well, wherever you went over there, you had to move the people out and get rid of them, take over their homes and everything. And so they sent these High Staten and this group that went out there on that team, that first team went out in there looking at the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And they came back to Addis and said, we just don't think that is practical. It's too far away from any big city, the communications, the roads, everything is just going to be a very difficult place to put in college. And the word came back from the embassy or wherever it was there and said, this is what the emperor wants.
This is what he'll
and what
get.
the emperor wants is what the emperor will get.
Mm-hmm.
So they had no choice. So they did the best they could find with what they thought might be a good spot for this college out there. And that's how that thing evolved. And then, of course, we had to have to move those farmers, and the government had to compensate them for their land and their houses. And boy, some of those people were very, very unhappy with us. And they were blaming the Americans for their uprooting them and all of this. So it wasn't an easy time to get along with them. We had an Ethiopian farmer he wanted to ride out to the campus, and he had been chewing, you know what chat is? And so he was intoxicated. And on the way out there, he was riding the back of the pickup, and suddenly he just dived out of that pickup and hit headlong into the road and broke his neck. Well, that really upset the whole population around the area. And they said, first the Americans come in here and take away our homes, and now they're killing our people. And I saw this big mob come. We were up on a hill. The college located on a little knoll. I could see from village after little village out there, and they were all heading up there. Oh, boy, we've got a real problem on our hands. But I don't remember now how it was resolved, but they never did attack us. But we weren't sure what was going to happen. But anyway, that was one of the real crises of just getting those people willing and telling them, well, your children can go to school now. And one good thing that came out of that, some of our students, those Ethiopian students, started holding classes for the locals. And that really helped change them around, their attitude.
How many buildings were on the campus at that time?
There was the classroom building. It was a 2-story structure. There was an administration building, a small clinic, a cafeteria, a dormitory, and about 8 staff houses.
And you lived in one of those staff houses?
Yes. First, without much amenities, and it barely gradually got better.
Now, you were saying that when the college started, there was difficulty building the power plant for it?
Yes. The power plant was not operational when we moved all those students and the staff out there. So they just bought a temporary generator.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember, we hired an Italian expatriate to run that generator later on. But at first it was not operational.
Did you teach as well as being the dean?
Yes.
How many courses did you
I
teach?
think I had 2 or 3.
2 or 3?
I had genetics, then I took a course in field crops, something else.
How did the students pay for their education?
It was all through the government. I don't think, as a matter of fact, we gave them a small stipend just so they could buy toothpaste and shaving soap and all that. Plus, we had the cafeteria and their meals were provided. And one of the wives of Hugh Hedger's wife was one that did a lot of the supervision of the cafeteria. And fortunately, one of the wives of one of the animal science man, she was a registered nurse. So she was our doctor. And my wife, they gave her the job as librarian.
Wow, nice. Did she have a background in that?
Nah, she had worked some in the library at Cameron, I believe it was.
Good enough for you.
I guess so. Got started anyway. You have to start small and work your way up.
Did who helped build the library? Was it the Strattons?
You mean the Staten, High Staten? Or who, the Staten? What do you mean?
Strattons.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
They might have come after your time.
Yeah, I don't know. We just took over a room, a fairly large room in the dormitory building.
Mm.
And that was the library at that time.
Where did the resources for the library come from?
The what?
Where did the books come from?
I think most of them came from here, from the U.S.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
What about, did the students have textbooks, that type of thing, or?
Yeah, it was the things that mostly it was books that were going to be used in their courses.
Hmm.
But in the library, they had some other books too.
Hmm. Whom did you work with?
Whom did I work with?
Yes.
As the acting dean or as the crops man, or which one of my jobs?
Well, what Well, what people stand out in your memory that you got along with real well or didn't, or
Well, I had good cooperation from most of the people. Each one had his own job. For example, the Frank Kubicek, he was the farm manager. He kept the vehicles running and the tractors going, and if we needed some plowing done or something, we'd check with Frank, and he would send one of his people out there to do these things or work on the car or whatever's necessary. And the animal science man, he would be having cattle and he would be working with them. So there was the interaction that we all pitched in when we had to. And that was one of the things that made that a success. We didn't say, well, I'm animal science and I don't have anything to do with this guy over here in horticulture, but no, they would help out wherever necessary. But most of the time, each one had his own little area, and then we were very sociable minded, and so we would have parties together, ice cream socials or whatever we could, and that really helped pass the time. And did a lot of things like that together in the evenings. Well, many of us like to drink beer. We'd order a truckload of beer. I'm not talking about a few cases. I'm talking about a 2.5 ton truck. We ordered it from Sherman. They'd come in on the train from Diradama.
how did it get up the mountain?
Well, he had that little truck. He had a low gear in it. And they carried that stuff up. And there were big bottles of Beck's beer. And we each had made our decision. We wanted 2 cases or 1 case. And so we stored them usually in our attic above the in the house. We in the evening we'd sit there, and after we got through work, and we'd drink that Beck beer.
When did you usually start work and end work?
The hours?
Yes.
Well, most of the time it was around, I'd say around 7:30 or something like that, and we usually quit by 5:30, 6.
Did you was siesta time included?
Was that?
Siesta time?
Not really. No, we didn't have much of a siesta time over there.
Okay. What parts of your assignment did you enjoy the most, and what parts did you enjoy the least?
Well, I enjoyed most of it. I enjoyed some of the trips outside the campus to look and understand more about the agriculture of the country, and especially the Harar, what they call the Churcher Highlands, which were there not far outside of Harar. And the roads were very difficult to get through, but just to see what the farmers were growing and how they were doing it. Of course, there was a lot of coffee up in there too. But I enjoyed those trips out to see that. And also, we enjoyed the opportunity to go out on picnics or hunting sessions and things like that when we had a chance. Have I answered your question or not?
I think so. What about, could you describe Ethiopian agriculture at that time for?
Very primitive, I could do a very simple word. It was mostly just sticks and things like that, and a little hose to chop with.
Subsistence agriculture?
Subsistence, definitely. And small plots.
Yes. No big farms?
No.
Was there a landowning class versus peasantry, or?
I think so. It's hard sometimes for me to separate out. But for the most part, I think they were all small farmers.
Now, how long were you temporary dean?
About 6 months, or it may have been maybe up to a year. I don't remember now.
Who came in after you as for the
Well,
deanship?
The fellow named, he's a veterinarian. His name was Keahey, Keahey. He's now in Michigan, and poor guy's got all kinds of. One fellow described it as mad cow disease. I don't know if it's something else or not, but he can no longer talk.
Oh, that's sad.
Poor thing. Yeah, good guy, but he wanted to be in administration, and I did not.
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, welcome to it." And so
Here you
Parcher,
go.
who was the president, he said, "Okay, Ben, if Kay's so much interested in this, let's just let him handle it, and you go about your job." He said, "But I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to be the vice dean." So I had two titles when I left there: vice dean and agronomist, I guess it was called. This was before Conrad and all of those people got over there.
What kind of, you said there was at the beginning a rough transition time period?
What kind of rush?
A rough between the local population and the university. How did that smooth out? Or was
by the things that I think, like I was telling you, these students started teaching, holding little schools for the people around them, for their kids. And of course, the government was slow in getting payment restitution for their land and houses that we had to tear down. See, we took over about 1,100 acres, as I remember. Pretty good size area. But as time passed, they seemed to accept that this was, the governor of Harar came out once after we had that incident I was telling you about, the man jumping out of the car and killing himself. He said, "You tell these people that if they give any trouble, I'll move them so far away that they'll never see this college again." Well, that's sort of the, when you get a dictatorship like that, or an emperor, I don't care what it is, they pretty much have absolute power.
Was that dictatorship backed up by the military, or?
Yeah, at that time it was. Military and police. I was on a mission down there in which a lot of military and police were on it.
Oh, describe for me your housing quarters. Could I say the word quarters and be accurate?
Accommodation.
Okay.
Good. Excellent.
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 How big was it? And
most of us had 3-bedroom houses, fireplace, nice kitchens, electric stoves, and everything was all electric as I remember, except for the fireplace. It was just very nice, and once we got them landscaped and the water was able to keep your flowers watered and things, it was good. It was wonderful living conditions. Good. They made good roads up there after a certain length of time.
Did you go much into Diradawa?
About once a week, but someone we would find out who was going down to Diradawa, and we say down because you probably are aware that it's lower elevation. And so then we had, one of the good things we had was a lot of cooperation among the staff. Not much selfishness about it. It was willing to do whatever necessary to keep the thing going. We knew we had to survive out there.
How long did it take to feel culturally acclimated to Ethiopia?
Not extremely long. I would say within 6 months, we were pretty much acclimated. We just felt, my wife just thrived on it. I was just amazed. She's not that type that adapts herself as well as I do. but she did. She loved Ethiopia. I've never seen her any time. She wasn't there. Never hadn't been that happy in many other places. We moved from Ethiopia to Minnesota, and I went into graduate school, and I was fighting for my life and trying to keep up with all these courses. And she had 2 small kids, and the snow and ice, and she got depression, mental depression up there. But boy, in Ethiopia, she just blossomed.
Did you see other Americans not adapt as well?
Some of them. It varied. I used to say that people are like plants, like varieties. Some of them adapt easily, some don't. But for the most part, there were some of the Americans. Some of them, well, there was very good access to easy access to liquor. And there's a few people that just became alcoholics. And things like that would take place. Some of them we just had to ship home. I had one that during my vice dean job over there that I had to send back to Addis, and he finally just left and went on back. It wasn't alcohol, but it was a problem. It was a problem that was really affecting the whole group.
Yes.
And then when you get one person that is creating a problem out there for the rest, problems. You better get them out of there. They're in the wrong place. I don't care how good they are with other things.
What tended to cause the most culture shock?
I guess it was the abject poverty and disease prevalence.
Disease? What types of disease?
Everything from leprosy to this elephantitis.
Yes.
To TB and
dysentery
and syphilis. Syphilis was just widespread. Before you hired a servant, you'd have them send them down to the hospital and get a syphilis check on them.
Now, speaking of diseases, did you have to get any shots before you came out?
Yeah, we had yellow fever, and we had 2 or 3 shots that had to be taken.
What about another disease-bearing item is usually water. How did the college treat the water?
Well, we had our own water treatment process there, and I never did really understand just how it was treated, but it was safe. That was the good part. But before we got that, when we were traveling, for example, and the first year we were there, we had to boil all of our water, and then we had a filter that we would filtrate because the water was sometimes. One guy said he saw a leech come out the faucet as he opened to take a bath. But when we go out on trips, many times if we couldn't carry enough drinking water with us, we'd buy a case or 2 of beer. And so we just drink beer for something to keep it for hydrating.
Did you buy Ethiopian beer?
No, most of the time we bought imported.
Really?
This Beck's beer or something.
Did you participate in American traditions, celebrations when you were over there?
Yes, some. We held our own Christmas parties and 4th of Julys and stuff like that. But it's a small group.
When you were celebrating these, such as Christmas or the 4th, did you invite your students? Or
I don't remember inviting the students. Not much, as I recall.
What about servants?
Servants, same thing. We just sort of did this on our own.
Did you participate in any Ethiopian customs and celebrations?
Very little. I think I went to one wedding. I can't even I'm pretty sure I went to one wedding. That's about it.
What about how did you adapt to Ethiopian food?
Oh, no real problem. I liked the native, what they call it, injera and wat, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I would drink some of the tej, which is a form of liquor, once in a while. Not a lot of it. It seemed like they didn't have much variation in their food. It became a little bit monotonous.
Mm.
And same thing, injure and what, about, yeah. Now I know they made the what with different kinds of meat. Sometimes it was chicken, sometimes it was something else. Sometimes it was goat.
Was there did the college butcher animals?
Yes, we butchered our own.
And once you butchered, it was given to the students or staff or.
Yeah, for the students and staff. The staff had to buy it,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't terribly expensive. And then we had access to these wild animals.
Oh.
And that was some of the best meat. And we had the guinea fowl and partridge, which have huge white meat breast on them. Mm-hmm. We just go out there and kill them by the hundreds in the trees, and very well take the breast off, put it in the freezer. We went down to the lakes and we would catch these big catfish that were excellent, and they just almost jump into your lap. It was so easy to catch. And we'd fillet those things and put them in the freezer and take it. We had deep freezers, many of us did. And so we froze the stuff. And when we wanted some fish or we wanted a bird, we didn't have to wait to try to buy it at the college. We had, and wild pig was excellent. Mm. The gazelle were wonderful and tender. But we ate like kings.
You did?
Yeah.
Did your servants cooked, right?
Yes.
And did any of them prepare any like European dishes?
Oh, mostly they like the Italian influence was strong.
Okay.
And so they cooked a lot of spaghetti and meat sauce and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any other interactions with other Americans besides university faculty and whatnot?
Not a lot. When you're isolated out there like Alamaya is or was, there's just not much chance to get them. There was a contingent of Indians, I'm talking about Indians, mm-hmm. located at Harar, who had been brought in there to train the military. And these were high-class Indians, and we had a few get-togethers with them.
Were you surprised to see Indians out there?
No, at the time, it's very cosmopolitan in many ways. The Italians are running all over the countryside. The different nationalities are there. There's a lot of Arabs.
Armenians?
Probably Armenians too.
Some Greeks?
Yeah, I didn't see many Greeks though. More, the Italians are the preponderance, of course, having been there. They conquered the country at one time.
I was going to ask eventually about that. So, did you bring any customs back with you from the States? Customs?
Customs.
Yeah, like what'd you bring back from Ethiopia?
Well, things like this, pictures. things like that that we didn't bring. And as far as habits, I don't know if you're thinking about
Yes.
certain habits, traits. No, I don't think we did. I'm not aware of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How did you record your stay over in Ethiopia? Did you write a lot? Did you keep a diary? Did you take pictures or
Mostly taking pictures.
pictures? Do you still have those?
Quite a few of them. I got. I have both slides as well as black and white, I believe.
Mm-hmm. How often would you write home?
Oh, usually about every 2 weeks, or maybe a week. I'm pretty good at writing, sitting down and writing.
And did you have armed forces, post office privilege?
We had PX privileges.
Yes.
We didn't have any mailing privileges. We had to buy
Really?
air letters, and you have to get those that are already imprinted. You don't want to buy the stamp and put it on there because they'll take the stamp off. And throw the air letter away. But if it's printed on there, they can't get it off. But I guess that some of the people had a shortwave radio, and they would listen to some of the news back here.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed like people just sort of lost themselves and they're absorbed in their activities and didn't even really think much about home.
How long would it take for you to get and to receive a letter from back home?
As I remember, it was at least a week and sometimes a little over a week, maybe 10 days.
It's not too bad.
No, not too bad.
And you came home once?
A year, every 2 years.
Every 2 years? And you came back to Oklahoma then?
Now, we usually had 3 months, 2 or 3 months. There was a month of vacation, and there was some other, I forget what they called it.
Leave time?
What?
Leave time?
I don't know what it was. We had quite a bit of time once per year to get the feel for the country and the purchasing of things and get a lot of things before going back. Of course, we only did that twice, but some of the people, they stayed there for I don't know how many years.
Conrad, for sure. He
Conrad,
stayed there 12.
I don't know how long
He stayed there a dozen years, I believe.
Yeah, it could be.
Now, what did your family back home think of this?
This whole thing is out there, us going over there and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were a little bit concerned, but didn't show, at least, that they were extremely worried. The main thing is he just missed, like my wife's mother, being a widow, she missed seeing the grandchild. And then the second child was born over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was probably 8 months or a year after the child was born that she finally saw her for the first time. But she was very patient and busy with her own work. And I know she wanted to see him. But I don't know, people, all of them accepted the idea that we were gone and we won't be back for a while.
Now, when your second child was born over there, they didn't receive a birth certificate, correct?
They did. They got a birth certificate.
Okay.
Through the American Embassy.
Oh, that's how. Okay. How often did you go much to the embassy at all, or?
Did I go much when I was over there?
Yes.
Oh, we got to know several of the people in the embassy. They would go to parties together, especially when we were stationed in Addis.
Mm-hmm.
And mixed with them pretty good, quite a few ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get to know them by first names, and it's a pretty close-knit group.
How did you move about Ethiopia? Did you own a vehicle or?
We had a big. They imported our car for us, but mostly it was the university had a number of vehicles of their own, Land Rovers, few Jeeps, mostly Land Rovers. They seem to be the most dependable and comfortable thing to use. But then, of course, we could use the airplane to get like flights between Deir Java and Addis Ababa, or some of those places.
Did you ever take the rails?
Never.
Never?
I never did use the rail. Mostly it was either driving. A lot of it was be a group of people going together, and they'd have 2 or 3 cars in case one broke down.
Oh yeah, you don't want to be stuck out there, not knowing where you are. Did you ever travel down to Jimma?
Yeah.
And interact with the folks down there?
Some, but again, we were so far apart.
Yeah, because that's
didn't see very much interaction, but I wanted to see the college down there. And so we made a special trip. We drove down one time, spent, I don't know, 2 or 3 days down there.
And what'd you think of the college down there?
Oh, it was, it's okay. It was not as nice as Alamaya by any means. Buildings were old. Facilities were fairly good. But the people down there had some things that were pluses that were better off than Alamaya. They could get from Jimma up to Addis pretty easily by car, but we couldn't. It was primarily by flying from Deir Dawa. The road system from Deir Dawa down there to Addis was bad. Many bridges were out.
Yeah, was that because of the
part of the war and the fact that they didn't want to compete with the railway. The railway, the Ethiopian government had some interest. Royal family or somebody had some financial interest in that railway, and they did not want the trucks running in competition with them. That is what I heard. So they never did fix the highway. I mean, the Italians had built a pretty good road, I guess. But hey, during the war, they just blew those bridges and they never did fix them back up. Never did keep the surface of the roads paved. So it was, I guess, I don't believe I ever did make that trip by land.
Did you?
After also you pass through some pretty fierce Donakill country down in there.
Donahill?
Donakill, Danakil. It's a tribe of people, desert people, pretty fierce. And so you have to be very cautious when you're going through there.
Did you see any other remnants of the Italian Obsessian War?
Any evidence?
Yeah, any evidence? Tanks, bombed out vehicles, or anything like that? Or was that all cleared by then?
The primary thing that I saw was not the military, Italian military, but Italy was trying to show the world that they could develop a colony that they could be proud of. So they brought in a lot of Caterpillar tractors, and we acquired several of them, fixed them up, and used them for plowing.
Hey, gotta make use of what you got.
Yeah, and they worked good. As long as you had a good mechanic that knew how to work on them and get them going. No, I didn't see much evidence of the actual military conflict or anything like that. But I know that the Italians had really put a lot. Somebody said Mussolini had almost bankrupted Italy, trying to build Ethiopia up because it was so far down the hill.
Yeah.
They had nothing essentially except some good climate and some good soil over there.
Did you travel anywhere else?
Any other countries?
Yeah, whether it be Africa or even Ethiopia itself. Did you see the country much, or?
Oh, I saw quite a bit. Yeah, I saw. As I said, went to Jima at least once. May have been more than once. And I've been up north quite a ways, not all the way to Asmara, but quite a ways up there. I can't remember the name of the town now. I didn't travel as extensively as some people did, but I did get around some. And of course, through the Churchill Highlands, and that sort of rings all the way around Diradawa and Alamai. It's a high elevation area all through that area.
What about, did you travel to any other African countries?
I went down to Kenya for a little bit of, it was more or less vacation. I think it was I stuck it on the end of my vacation time.
Mm-hmm.
And I arranged with the British were in charge down there at that time. And I wanted to talk and meet with some of the agricultural people that I'd heard about and knew something about down there. And at the same time, we wanted to go out to the big game reserve there just outside of Nairobi, which we did. The British consulate or whoever, somebody there, they furnished us a car and driver and took us out there around the park. They had another car and driver take me out there into the escarpment and look at wheat and so forth at Nagoro, which is it's also an area that's well known for flamingos.
Mm.
Huge area of flamingos out there at that lake. And no, we didn't travel a lot. We didn't, as far as I know. The only other African travel I did was much later than that. It was on a special assignment to go to West Africa here a few years ago.
Mm.
I didn't get to Tanganyika or Uganda or any of those countries.
Okay. Did President Wilhelm make a trip over?
Yes, several.
Several trips? And we were going to discuss that earlier, but can you describe for us your relationship with Oliver Wilhelm and what he was like, what his personality was like?
That man he could have been governor if he had so desired. He just had that warm personality about him and his uncanny ability to recall names. I just give you two quick examples. One was one day that's when I was working still there at OSU. And I walked into this little barber shop just on the outside of the campus there, out there, whatever that street is there, just on the east side. Not Knobloch, was it? Anyway, I walked into this barber shop to get a haircut. And he was in there getting his haircut. And he looked at me and he said, "Hi, Ben. Say, I saw your dad today. I was over in Muskogee." It just floored me. I hear this man, president, and he remembers me and he remembers my father. And I remember a time when I was in Ethiopia and he came over for a visit. And he arrived the night before or something. But anyway, the next morning, I happened to be around the office and he come down to the office. I thought in my mind, well, he won't remember me. But boy, he looked up and said, "Well, hello, Ben, how you doing?" And another time, where was it? I was about to be pulled out of the university and put back into the service at the Korean War.
Mm.
And I needed a letter from OSU stating that my job was essential and I should be given a deferment. So I already had orders to report to the air base. I'd gone to the Air Force, but then I got out of that infantry. And I went to see Dr. Wilhelm. And that was before he was president. That's when he was Dean of Agriculture.
Mm.
And he said, Ben, of course I'll write a letter for you. And people had told me earlier, said, oh, OSU will not ask for a deferment for anybody during this Korean War. He said, sure, I'll write a letter on your behalf. And by gosh, it worked. I got a deferment. I didn't have to go to Korea.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a real warm spot in my heart for Dr. Wilhelm.
How did he know your father?
My dad was in a little bit of agricultural co-ops or something
Mm-hmm.
over around Muskogee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he may have gone over for some meetings that the co-op held or something.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't hurt that you were a southwestern Oklahoma boy.
Probably not.
Yeah. Now, have you maintained relationships with those that you met from your time in Ethiopia?
You mean Ethiopians or Americans?
Both.
Very little with the Ethiopians. Once every 2 years we've been getting together, as you know. And occasionally I'll get to see someone, but not all the time. There'll be a lot of people they'd gone through Alabama much later, and so I didn't know who they were. Well, I very little contact with the Ethiopians. And this one guy that worked with me when I first went over there, Dan Yergu, when he got killed by the communists, they had set up a foundation at Purdue, and so I was in contact and sent some money in his memory because he was such a good man and such a good friend. With the Americans who were over there, I try to make as many of those reunions as I can. But I hear that they may be finished, dying away, dying out.
When was your last reunion?
Oh, I guess it's 2 years ago. Yeah, the group is just gone down. They're dying off.
Wow.
Now, there's a man over here at Bixby. Or is it Bixby? Jinx. Name is, what in the world is his name? He was over there shortly. I wasn't there working with him at the same time, but we once in a while call each other Hobb.
What's his name?
Hobbs. Wesley.
Hobbs?
Hobbs. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Wesley Hobbs. His wife is Marie.
All right. I have to look into that.
And they live right here, not too far away. I call them once in a while.
Okay.
And was there any others that, of course, Hugh Hedger and I we worked together over there so many, and setting up that Deborahite and all that. And he lived in the city, so I would try to go by and see him. He had macular degeneration and several things, but I'd go by and try to see him when I would go up to see my daughter up there in the city. Mm-hmm. And no, he was kind of lonesome out there by himself. Couldn't get around and see very much. And he passed away about 6 months ago. And Delbert Whiteneck, he's there in Stillwater. And usually when I'm up there in Stillwater, I'll try to go by. And of course, his wife, such a wonderful nurse. We really had a close association with her. And Bill Webb, I see him once in a while, but it's not. I didn't even know whether he still lived in Stillwater.
No, he's now in the Oklahoma City.
That's what I got. Somehow I got him. And then there was a fellow named Ed Smith, who is there at Stillwater, or was.
Okay.
I don't know. Ed and I were classmates at Minnesota.
Oh, Gophers.
And yeah. But then Ed went to Ethiopia after he graduated from Minnesota for 2 years, I think. But he never did attend any of these reunions. So I don't know. He doesn't care about going to them. Doesn't care about keeping up with any of the people. But Conrad has been a good contact for me over there.
He's been a good contact for me, that's for sure. He's the one that gave me your information.
Yeah, I'm surprised. But Conrad knows me pretty well. We've known each other for years.
Did you have any contact with the Emperor?
With the Emperor, a little bit. Not much. Not many people have a lot of contact with. We have a picture somewhere here of the Emperor shaking hands with my little daughter, who's downstairs.
Yes.
He had a reception. We had a reception or something, and he was came out to Alamaya, and he was thanking the Americans for their work and their efforts over there. And they invited the wives and the children to be there. And I've got a picture of her and shaking hands with the Emperor. So that was really my only real contact with the Emperor. When I was sent down the Kenya border, the Emperor was very perturbed, and another organization called the World Food Organization, or FAO, they were supposed to send an expert down there on the agriculture, agronomy side. Kenya and Ethiopia were having a dispute about their boundary. And he said, I want some people who are knowledgeable about agriculture to go down there along with my governor and some police and army and give me an assessment of what's really going on down there. And so the FAO man got halfway down there and he knew that this was going to be a big, big trip. He was going to be tied up for a while. So he said, my boss is coming in from Rome and I've got to go back and meet him in Addis. So they sent the word to the Emperor. And he said, oh, to hell with FAO. Send somebody from Point 4, from Alamaya, some of that OSU bunch. Well, it's Easter. I happened to be the unlucky guy that was around. I hadn't gone way out for Easter vacation somewhere. So they loaded me on a plane and sent me down there to the border with Ethiopia and Kenya.
How did, I forgot to ask this question when you were talking about President Wilhelm. How did he shape the Ethiopian project?
How did he shape it?
Yes.
I think he was one of the best supporters we have ever had. I just felt like the man was really behind us 100%. Seemed like anytime there was a question or something came up, boy, he would get on it. And if he had to go to Washington and argue our case, well, he'd do it.
As you look back now, how do you feel about your Ethiopian experience?
Oh, I think it was a wonderful decision to make. And I think I've had no regrets about it. And the fact that my family, especially my wife, the children were still very young, but the fact that my wife enjoyed the opportunity to be over there, and it made a real impression on her. So I have no regrets.
What impact did it have on your life and the lives of those you shared it with?
Well, it gave me a lot broader vision of what the world was like and what the problems were in the world, and trying to figure out how to handle some of these things as you come along. Because after Thailand, Ethiopia, I spent a lot of time in Thailand, so I had a feel for I kept going back when I first got to Thailand and said, well, now how does this relate to Ethiopia? Because I had some experience over there in Ethiopia. So it helped in that way. The Ethiopia was further along. I mean, Thailand was much further along. They had better infrastructure. They had better build up of things. For example, good food to eat. In Ethiopia, I was reluctant many times to eat unless I was in a real nice cafe somewhere. Over in Thailand, I would eat almost anywhere. Delicious food. So Ethiopia had a long way to go.
Now, you were talking about earlier before we started recording, you were talking about how you felt that this Ethiopian OSU's Ethiopia project was money well spent.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on that more.
Well, I've seen some projects which have been built, and a lot of money's invested in them, and nothing much comes from them. They don't last. And but with the OSU project over in Alamaya and Gemma, it's something that has continued to produce outstanding young men, teachers, and this is not just my own feeling. I've talked to people who've been there recently, and they tell me it is definitely an ongoing thing. It's still going on well, and they say you don't find these too often. Many times it's somebody to buy political favors. I think the fact that those people, just like this man that just won the World Food Prize, he is a good, outstanding example of what a good, bright young man can do if given the opportunities. And a lot of those people that went through that first 2 or 3 classes that I helped work with that came through Alamaya, I'd put them up against anybody. And most of them got PhDs now. And I don't know where they are. Some of them, many of them, I think they'd go back if they could, weren't for the bad government that they have over there. But they have still, I think, have left a legacy there. So it's something that is going to go on, and it will be, governments can come and governments can go, but I think you've got that basic group that can hold that thing together. Oh, I just feel like it was money well spent.
Now, are there any questions that I have not covered about your Ethiopian experience?
I think you did a pretty thorough job.
What about then? Can you briefly describe what happened to you after your Ethiopian experience? Like you went to Minnesota, got your PhD, then you worked in Thailand for 17 years. And can you just basically fill out the biography real quick here? After
I left Ethiopia, I spent about 4 years on my PhD in Minnesota. And then went back to OSU. And picked up and went back to teaching a graduate course in plant breeding and doing some research in wheat. And then there was turmoil within the department. And the head that had brought it was very dynamic. He left, went to Illinois, and the new man that came in had other ideas, and he was trying to impose them. And many of the old staff did not like it. And so, about the time that all this turmoil was going on, Rockefeller had approached me about going to work for them, and they finally asked me to go over to Thailand and look at the program. And I went over rather negatively, kind of like I was thinking about Ethiopia at one time. And what I saw was something I thought, well, I could have some impact over there. So I had a little trouble with OSU because they had this turmoil within the department, and another staff member leaving it was not going to look good. But I told the head, I said, I think I should go. I think it's part of my life, but I think I better invest in it. And so he finally agreed. And so I went over there, and I never expected to be there 17 years, but it was wonderful. 17 years, and huge, and they got a lot more infrastructure than ever I saw in Ethiopia. Roads, travel, communication, money to do things with. As a matter of fact, they told me, said, we only want one thing from Rockefeller, and that's you. You tell us what you need, and we'll do our darndest to get it. And they did. They held it. They kept up to that promise. So when I left Thailand, it's kind of like Ethiopia, but it's a better situation because I left a lot of trained people over there. I'm not just talking about training for a year or two. They all got, many of them got PhDs and MS degrees, and they were on the job, and they were getting the thing done. And I would have stayed longer, but Rockefeller said, no, that's enough. So then
when were you over in Thailand?
In Thailand from about 19... from 66 to 83.
Wow.
Then I
saw, actually, I'm going to ask this, but you were in Thailand at the height of the Vietnam War.
That's right.
Did you, what kind of things you saw? Did you see soldiers passing through Thailand, or?
Oh, yeah. Lots of American soldiers. They're based or on leave from Vietnam over there. They military buildup. They have 3 or 4 or 5 big air bases there that they used in Thailand to bomb Vietnam. There was a big U.S. military presence, and they had Sahib down there where they had these huge bombers. What did they call them? B-52s or whatever they were. And then actually I was asked to go over there 2 or 3 times and assess the rice situation.
In South Vietnam?
Yeah. And so I went over there. As a matter of fact, I was there about a month before it fell. Huh. And it was getting pretty risky to go over there. But I took a South Vietnam airline out of Saigon, and we took off and headed out to the ocean. And the reason they did that was because they didn't have to fly over Viet Cong with missiles down there on the ground. And we flew down to the south part of Vietnam, at a place called Can Tho, and we looked at the rice situation, and then I flew back up to Saigon and took off. About a month later, fell. But I'd been over there 2 or 3 times earlier than that. And I'd spent a lot of time surveying the whole country. And that is the south side of it. But then when Rockefeller said, you've been there long enough, 17 years is enough, And the Thais kept putting up protests. We need him and we want him to stay. And they said, well, it's the time for you to leave while you still want it. But anyway, Rockefeller gave me a 1 year study leave at the University of Arkansas. I wanted to go somewhere where there was rice being grown because I'd spent so much time in rice over the last 17 years. So I chose Fayetteville because it was close to where my mother lived in Muskogee. And also the fact that it's the biggest rice growing state in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And then they gave me permission to travel all around that rice growing area, Louisiana, Texas, the whole thing. So in the summer, I would just drive one to the next and visit several days and look and see what they're doing and all that. Well, next thing I knew, I'd been about 3 or 4 months in Arkansas, and I had an office there, and they made me a special staff member. And I got a phone call from a fellow that I knew, and he said, Ben, we're looking for a leader of a rice research project in Indonesia, and we would love to have you come over here. I said, we know you, they know you, you don't have to be interviewed and all of that. We'll take you if you just say come. That's all you have to do. And while I was deliberating on that, I got a message from IITA, which is the International Institute of Technical Agriculture down in Africa, at Nigeria. And they said, we need you to go down we want you to head up all of the rice research for Africa. And before I could have much time to think about that, and I'd only been on study leave for about 4 or 5 months. And I got a phone call from the head of the experiment station in Mississippi. It said, we're looking for a rice breeder. And we'd like for you to come down here and take a look. So I went down there and took a look, and I liked what I saw. And I decided, I've been out of the country long enough. And so I took that job. And I went there till I was retired.
Starkville?
Pardon?
Starkville?
No, I was at Leland, Mississippi, which is just outside of Greenville.
Okay.
It's one of the largest.
It's on the Delta.
It's the Delta.
Uh-huh.
Biggest research station, I think. It's got the USDA plus state. And but they hadn't had a rice breeder there. And they said, the rice people keep demanding we get a rice breeder in here.
And after you retired, you returned home to Oklahoma?
That's it. My wife said, you dragged me all over the world. I've been in Africa, I've been in Asia.
I've been in Mississippi now.
So anyway, we had 3 grandchildren up here.
All right. One last question. In the grand scheme of things, what does Oklahoma State University mean to you?
Well, it will always mean a lot to me because it gave me my education and the fact that I am an Oklahoman and that I still have a very sense of loyalty to the university there and concerned about its future and its welfare. I don't get very active because I haven't been asked to, and I'm getting kind of old to get very active anyway. But it means a lot to me. I still would recommend OSU to people who want to go to school and get some education. I think it's a good place to go. And it's one of the more reasonable priced universities. Now, I don't know much about this new president. I know I used to watch him on TV, and a liberal would sit there and argue politics on TV. Hargis, isn't his name?
Yeah, Burns Hargis.
I can't. Mike something was the liberal's name, and they would talk politics with each other, but they always on a very good natured level.
And he's doing a good job thus far. So
Good. What happened to Barger, or whatever his name was?
Lawrence Boger, I couldn't tell you. That's before my time. I just remember I was hired in May 2008. So
2008. Yeah, that's not been too long ago.
So-
May of 2008. Yeah.
is there
2009. Yeah.
so not that long.
Not less than 2 years.
Yep. Is there anything you like to add?
No, I would add this, that I am delighted that OSU is doing something here to make some of this history, because I think we're going to see significant things come out of that effort that was put in over there. And it may take years to really see it, but I think that the basis was laid there for some very good things to happen to that country, because the country has a lot of potential if given the government that's necessary to get it going. The people are intelligent, they're hardworking, but they needed that stimulus to get going and the opportunities. And so I would like to see it. I have a lot of confidence it's still going to continue. It's paid off some already, but it will continue to pay off.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good time to stop this.
Okay.
And I thank you for your participation today.
Well,